Avalanche is set at a ski resort, and well, there's an avalanche. This lower budget effort came at the tail end of the 1970s disaster boom, and it was on an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000. But it's got Robert Forster in it, so it can't be all bad. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
Can I give you a big hug?
No, this is a movie podcast and we are working through 70s disaster movies. This is the penultimate episode of the season, and today we are looking at Avalanche. And I understand David's got the perfect weather to discuss this in.
Yeah, no, for anybody who lives on the East Coast, this is being recorded at the beginning of January-ish, so winter storm just hit and it sucks.
So yes, welcome everyone. We will start spoiler free, of course, as we always do, and we'll get into the spoilers in a bit. We'll start off by giving our general thoughts, feelings, all that kind of thing. Before we get started though, I'll just remind everyone that if you do enjoy the discussion, please do hit the like button. It helps us out a bunch. And of course you can get bonus content and bonus shows that me and David do every month over at Patreon, patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. I'll tell you more about what those shows are at the end. But thank you for joining the show, and let's get into it. Avalanche is a movie from 1978 from New World Pictures, and New World Pictures are kind of your B-movie factory. They do a lot of direct-to-video stuff and that kind of thing.
Right. I'm glad you said that, because I had not heard of them, and that's the kind of vibe I was getting there. This felt like a B-movie sort of thing going on.
Yeah, I've seen New World Pictures a number of times in my travels. But there are some real actors in this. Rock Hudson, who I don't know that well, but obviously he's a name from the past. But we also have Farrow, and Robert Forster is in this. So we got some real people in this, sort of slumming it and doing like a little movie in between the real movies. As opposed to all those
fake people who we don't care about at all. Look at you, Steve Franken.
You know what I mean? The people that we're only recognize, and because they are recognizable. They're people who you might know from other movies. But the premise of this one's quite simple. It is a ski resort at the bottom or somewhere up a mountain, and there's a lot of signs that say maybe it's not safe to have a ski resort on this mountain. Those are ignored, and eventually there's an avalanche. That's your premise.
That's the movie. You just did the whole spoilers, everybody. That's it.
So we'll get to all the details in a bit, but we can start off by simply asking the question that I always start with. David, what did you think of insert movie here? I mean, Avalanche.
It's there was a point at the beginning where I thought, okay, this seems like it's pretty competently shot, and like we focus on Mia Farrow to begin with. And then all of a sudden, about like 90 seconds in, I gave up hope, because the editing, the line delivery, everything in this is exactly as you said. It's a B movie. Like, this had the vibe to me where they were contractually obligated to put it into theaters, but in reality, they wanted this to go on to like HBO and just show on TV. Like, it feels like something that was filmed for syndication almost immediately.
Sure.
Special effects.
Well, I'll just. I don't think HBO existed in 1978.
No.
But I think I agree with what you're saying in that. Well, it was going to theaters. I think there's a moment in this movie, and somewhere in the middle, where someone's looking through binoculars. And I couldn't help but notice that the binocular could add like a sort of the black cutout around the edges to sort of represent someone looking through binoculars. And I couldn't help but notice that the binocular view was like really in the middle, and there was a lot of empty space at the sides.
Yeah.
And I instantly got the feeling that, okay, they know that most of their business is going to be on VHS, where this is going to be pan and scanned, and that's why this has been shot completely safe for that ratio.
Yep, exactly. And I mean, that's the vibe I got throughout this whole movie. The editing, just from shot to shot, is honestly, it's so incompetent at times that it almost feels like intentional, like they're parodying it somehow, but it just never delivers on that. And then special effects, I can't help but shake the feeling that they filmed all this stuff practically, or as much as they could, and they said like, okay, that's fine for like the big stuff, we'll go ahead and do in special effects, we can do that. And then they got into the editing booth and they realized, oh, wait, we can't do that. We are woefully ill-equipped to do the things we want to do. Oh, well, do our best. So, yeah, overall, great movie. Loved it.
Look, it's not good, right? I'll start off by saying that. It's obviously not a good movie. I will say there are moments of joy that I had, not because they were doing something well, but because, and sadly it wasn't because of really any of the actual Avalanche stuff, but there was like some over-the-top character things in the first half that were making me laugh. Some of the weird... Like, I'll just say, this movie has some of the most weirdly toxic relationships I've seen in a movie in quite some time. And it's more than one. It's not just, like, one example. There's too many examples in this movie of relationships where... And they're different kinds as well. Like, one's kind of this husband that's trying to be controlling, and then the other one's a boyfriend/husband who is sleeping around. And when confronted with this, some of the results of that really made me laugh. We'll get into that in spoilers, but
I know exactly what you're talking about. But that's where I felt like it was getting so campy and like parody-wise, is that they were so over the top that I was like, am I supposed to be taking this seriously?
It's funny because obviously they shot a lot of stuff in real snow, and so the snow looks good, right? And then some Avalanche stuff happens, and there's like these big polystyrene, which is meant to be clumps of snow, but they're rocking about as if they're a solid object, and I'm like, that's not how snow functions. Snow doesn't look like that.
I mean, if it's hard enough, yes, but like clearly this is just someone repainted the boulders from a landslide movie, and like that's all this is.
Yes. So that really stuck out to me. So it's not really got the spectacle. The shots they have of actual Avalanche stuff, I'm assuming is stock footage. I would be...
Did you not like pay attention to that? Because for me, every time they cut to it, the film grain was so degraded and scratchy that it was super obvious that it was like a run through the ringer and they just picked it up from like a dumpster or something.
You're probably right. I mean, I watched this on YouTube because it was on Plex, but Plex has ads, so I thought, oh, it's on YouTube, technically in HD. I say technically because the bitrate's so shit that it might as well not be, to be honest. But it was better because there was an SD version on YouTube as well, which obviously I wanted to avoid. But you can easily watch this, is what I'm saying. If you want to go and watch this, you can go find it for free. It's got a weird structure. It's got a weird pacing. I think one of the big things is that it felt like a real disaster movie for the first half because it felt like it was setting up a good, decent amount of characters, each with their own relationships, which I thought, oh, this is going to pay off after the disaster because they're all going to be trying to save each other or so on and so forth. But once the Avalanche hits, which is just before the hour mark, it's 57 minutes in to this 93-minute movie.
It's an hour and a half long. There's not a lot of Avalanche time.
Once the Avalanche happens, which is about 10 minutes of just chaos and like stuff happening, then it's like the rescue stuff. I felt like the rescue stuff was basically just a series of each thing we introduce happen, we're going to resolve each one by one in a list, and then we'll introduce one new little jeopardy right at the very end, and that's it. That's the whole movie.
I agree, except that I don't think that they even like resolved that many. I can think of two. They had exactly like two things that they resolved, and they were like, and now here's the big action cliffhanger for the end of the movie, and we're done.
Yes, and actually, again, I'll save the details for spoilers. But I will say there's a quick little montage of the emergency services coming to the ski resort once the disaster happens.
That was great.
And it might be the funniest, most random sequence I've ever seen in a movie because of just how, I guess things are happening here. This was I was expecting a quick shot of just an ambulance and a fire engine driving to establish they're on their way. Instead, stuff started happening. I'm like, why is there stuff happening in this scene? Imagine you're watching Towering Inferno and like the sequence where all the fire engines are all coming towards the building and like the firefighters are like, hey, oh no, we're going to that big tall building. That's scary. Oh damn, we're going to have a hell of a night. And then imagine the driver of the fire engine just fell asleep at the wheel and caused a big pile up where all the fire engines started crashing into each other.
It's even worse than that because it's not even falling asleep at the wheel. It's introduced the same way of like there's a dog in the middle of the road and then it's just all of that stuff. There's now another building on fire because of their incompetence. It's insane.
Yeah, so It's very cheap. It does have real actors in it. Much of the first 40 odd minutes are just relationships, dramas, but at least they're kind of funny because they're so silly and over the top. The weird jealousy angles, and there is some nudity at least, so you got that going.
It is PG, but it's a 1970s PG, which is essentially an R rating today when it comes to sexuality.
Yeah, you got some. I'm gonna say it's raunchy, but I mean, it's something to, and it's cold, so it's the best kind of boobs. Cold boobs are the best boobs. Okay.
I would debate that, but all right.
I'm making a silly joke because of nipples. Okay, because
no, I get that, but it implies a level of like necrophilia, which is much more unsettling.
No, that's not what I was getting at.
I get that.
Little chilly. I'm talking about a little chilly.
Okay. I get it, dude.
Well, still body heat, goddammit, all right?
But no, yeah, it's the thing that gets me though is you're saying that all of these like relationship drama stuff at the beginning, but I do want to point out that as much as that drama stuff is there, it's so strangely paced and so I don't want to say like the dialogue is bad, but it just feels unnatural the whole time.
It's pretty unnatural. I think the bigger complaint with it though is that none of it actually matters after the avalanche happens. Right. That's the biggest. Like, if I was going to say objectively the biggest thing that's wrong with this movie, and there's a bunch of things that you can critique quite happily, I would say the biggest thing is that all of the relationship stuff they set up in the first hour doesn't really have anything resembling a payoff in the last half hour. It does not matter.
I mean, I wasn't sure if that was technically a spoiler or not, but yeah, I wholly agree to that. My favorite thing, though, is that in the entire opening sequence to the movie, you get introduced to all of these people. There's apparently like some sort of winter sports going on at this ski resort, and like it's going to be like the big opening thing.
Yeah, there's a ski mobile race at one point, and there's like some skiing, figure skating, I should say, happening.
So we get introduced to like this real estate guy who's setting it all up, this TV show host who's going to be hosting the events. We get introduced to these figure skaters and this speed skier and all these different people. Meanwhile, once the avalanche happens, who cares about them? Now we're introduced to this kitchen staff and what they're up to for a while. It's like, what? The focus is so misplaced in this entire movie that I have no idea what's going on when this shift happens.
It's very scattershot. Also, we talk about these relationships in the first half of the movie. They're not evenly balanced either. It kind of focuses on Mia Farrow and her husband, or ex-husband, I should say, and Robert Forster, and it feels like it's more focused on them for like 20 to 30 minutes, and then it shifts to the speed skater and his love life, and it kind of focuses on that for like another like 15-20 minutes, and it felt like we kind of moved away from the characters we were well, because typically you'd bounce between them at an even pace so they feel like they're equally part of the movie. Here it didn't really do that. It kind of just lumped them all in one batch and then give you the other one in another batch, and then and those characters they put in jeopardy during the actual avalanche that they didn't really introduce. There's a whole thing with a kid, and I'm like, it'd have been nice to have been introduced to this kid in the first hour of the movie, but you didn't bother with that. So, okay.
This is not this movie's fault, but I did watch it on YouTube, and it's like the official YouTube version. It's the one that YouTube has uploaded under like their movies and TV section. You just have to watch it with ads if you don't have premium. But the bit that got me is that being the official version, the characters are saying things. You hear them talking, but I had on the subtitles just in case I missed something. So often the subtitles don't know what the characters are saying, so they just put in parentheses mumbles. And it gets really because there's the part where we introduce the kid and his parents, and it's just like, oh, and now heading up the mountain is Mr. and Mrs. like Courtney or something. But the subtitles didn't know, so like, now heading up the mountain, mumbles. And I'm like, they're saying the name, movie, give it some effort.
That sounds auto-generated to me.
Probably, but the fact that they had the idea to put in mumbles, it sounds like anything that kind of was gibberish, someone went in and manually was like, I'm not going to bother to fix it. Parentheses mumbles.
Yeah. I will say, to compare it to the previous movies we've done this season, I do think there's at least some bad movie enjoyment to be had here versus something like Cyclone. What did we do after Cyclone? Roller Coaster was probably better than this. Roller Coaster was a better movie.
Yeah, there was the bad ones were Swarm and then Cyclone, I would say. Those were the bottom barrel ones.
Yeah. comparing to Swarm's tougher, because I feel like they both have some bad movie qualities to enjoy, but they're very different. So I don't know which one I would say is.
I think the biggest difference is that Swarm still had the disaster movie aspect of it. Was like 2.5 hours long. It was a long movie, and they went ahead and they did the thing where you set up all these relationships, and then they pay off in the second half as the disaster's going on. This movie, it just decided that second half is unnecessary. It didn't want to do that, so we just end the movie.
But you do get through it in 90 minutes. Is that not a positive?
No, that is a positive. At least in this situation, I do see that as a positive.
Because I would have liked the Swarm to be over in 90 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I guess that's kind of the thing is if you look back on the Swarm, it was a problem of it took too long and didn't do enough. This one, because the Avalanche doesn't hit until an hour in, it's barely a disaster movie. Like we get, as you said, a couple scenes of rescue services coming in and saving some people, but then all in all, by the time you hit the end, it's just suddenly done with. We just skip ahead some indeterminate amount of time, and it's like, all right, that's it, we're done now.
Yeah, they didn't really put a lot of thought into like this sort of a drawn out kind of like rescue mission. Some people are trapped somewhere and we have to get to them, and that's going to be a big part of the problem solving. We kind of just rush through all that stuff.
There was a point where Mia Farrow ended up in Robert Forster's cabin up on the mountainside, and it looks like she's completely snowed in. It looks like she's totally stuck in there. And I thought, oh, okay, that's going to be a thing, because we have a love triangle of someone who works on the mountain and someone who theoretically caused this avalanche. They're all going to be trying to get to this woman they love. No, she's just out. She just leaves. There was no problem there. It's just poor structuring the whole way through.
Yeah, poor mismanagement of actually creating stakes and jeopardy, and like having the characters having to come up with solutions, watch them have to figure out problems. The sort of stuff that's fun in a survival disaster movie is the it's the problem, solution. How do we get to solution? Is the solution going to be tough? Is the solution risky? Because maybe that puts other characters in jeopardy, creating stakes. These are the kind of things you're looking for in a disaster movie. And this, by and large, kind of just neatly avoids all of it. It's almost depressive.
We could think through the cause and effect here, or we could paint more white boulders and throw them at people. Huh?
Oh, dear. All right.
Also, this has, I won't say who it is, but this has two of the funniest deaths I've seen in a long time.
I think I know what one of them might be, because the one immediately popped into my head as soon as you said that.
This second one we'll get to. At least it was funny for me. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Maybe at that point in the movie I was just like, yeah, good, die. I'm happy to see it.
All right, so I will just get spoilers. I don't know how much more we can dance around anything in this. Yeah. Not that anyone should really care about having this one spoiled, admittedly, but it's so New World Pictures, you open, you get some shots of a mountain, covered in snow, credits play, yada yada yada. And we're introduced to Mia Farrow's character, Caroline, who arrives at the ski resort. It turns out that she is the ex-wife of the guy who built and owns this place, right? That's Rock Hudson's character, David, or Shelby, David Shelby, right? Yes. So he has invited her here. He's happy she's here, and he wants to rekindle this romance. And there's maybe some implication that, his dream of building this place and doing all this is maybe partly why the marriage kind of fell apart, is that he was so focused on his work and his ambition that she kind of got left behind. But they seem to be on reasonable terms here.
We get the mother-in-law as well, where she is just immediately inserting herself here. She's like, oh, hey, you're here. Are you going to get back together with my son? And she's like, I don't know. That's kind of personal and nothing to do with you. And she's like, nonsense. I'm involved in everything.
So we get kind of a tour of the place. She goes up and meets her ex-husband. He wants to be alone with her. And I get that this is probably partially in the performance, right? I'm sure Mia Farrow was intentionally doing this to sell that she's not ready to get back together with him and that she's a bit uncomfortable with him making advances and whatnot. But it made me kind of uncomfortable that every time he kind of grabbed her and kissed her, it was like a dad grabs a child who's in trouble. He grabs the arm and her arms kind of hold out stiff and she looks terrified. And I don't think he's becoming across that threatening to me, but the way she's reacting to him, it almost implied, oh, was he really abusive or something? Because it kind of feels like she's terrified of this man.
Yeah, I get the implications there, and he definitely has a very intense personality, but as we get in a later scene, she basically explains, like, no, it was more of a you were always wrapped up in your work sort of thing, and you were always controlling of, like, what I was doing as well. It never felt abusive, but it did feel like she wasn't allowed to be her own person.
Yeah, like, I would say the body language tells me abusive, but everything that actually comes out in the dialogue makes it feel more, like what you were saying. But that was kind of there, and it was hard to kind of shake this weird feeling of like how they were reacting to each other. So that sets up their whole thing. There's a running thing here where he keeps saying he'll take her to lunch, but he keeps getting interrupted by phone calls or by press, or eventually by Robert Forster, who wants to talk about the mountain.
Don't get me wrong. I understand that they're trying to sell that he's like a businessman, and this is right before this big event, and he has all this stuff on his plate. I get that.
Yes.
But just because of how frequently he immediately like pivots his attention, this dude has ADD. Like, this dude 100% has untreated ADD, where he's just like, oh, this person said my name. You now have my undivided attention.
Yeah, and they do actually, they tease something just before they go in his office. The secretary calls him by his first name and then corrects herself and says, oh, Mr. Shelby. And I thought, okay, movie, are you actually going to pay that off? That maybe you're implying a sexual relationship between him and his secretary. And they do actually pay it off, which makes his whole trying to like be back together with his wife thing the whole movie kind of weird.
Yes, but no. I think that that part I actually think did good characterization, because his entire character is he wants everything. He wants it all, and he doesn't take no for an answer. And I think him having like his ex-wife back and his mistress, that makes sense for the character.
That's what he wants. Okay.
Yeah.
Because they don't do much with it. It's just that later, the next morning, after a bunch of other stuff's happened, it just cuts to him getting out of his hot tub, and his secretary's just there naked, like handing him a drink. So it's like, oh, okay, I guess you are having a thing. How does she feel about him wanting to be back with his ex-wife? I don't know. They never really get into that. So
well, when they introduce the wife here, during that scene where the secretary says his first name, she's like, oh, and this is my wife, and she's like, oh, hey, how's it going?
So here also introduces, and it's hard to tell when they're introducing all these characters which ones are going to be more prominent, so I'm focusing on the prominent ones because obviously I have hindsight. But they introduce sort of this skier, this blonde long-haired guy who is, he's a bit of a celebrity. They're wanting to interview him, and one of the main things they introduce as soon as he shows up is that women love him, right? He's a bit of a ladies' man, and he's there with his girlfriend Tina. And Tina's actually the ex-wife of another guy who's there. That is not important at all, but they do mention it at one point. Like, there's one scene where this other guy shows up and Shelby's like, hey, by the way, your ex is here and she's with the fancy skier man.
Well, he's the TV host.
That's who he is, okay.
Yep.
All right. So it sets this up, and it sets up that there's these figure skaters here that run up and get a photo with them, and Tina, the current girlfriend, just looks like she's ready to bite someone in the face because she's like jealous and pissed off that these women are giving him attention. And you see her briefly actually like a little bit later. Shelby, when he's going off to talk to Robert Forster, he passes her at the bar and she's like just drinking, and he's like, take it easy, Tina, will you? And it's implied that she's in such a jealous rage that she's just pounding booze back and whatever. So
yeah, you definitely get the implication that he has a history of like cheating on her, or at least flirting with other women.
Well, that's one of the lines that he has with the ex-husband when he's warning, hey, she's here with him. They talk about how, they've been together for a few months. That's long for her. It's also long for him. They kind of point out that they're both known for, I don't know, not sleeping around necessarily, but like not having a long relationship.
Yeah, non-monogamy.
Yeah. So I set up them, and then Robert Forster, who's probably my favorite actor in the movie because I like him in a lot of other things.
Oh yeah, he was good.
Yeah, he shows up, and I actually thought he was like someone who works on the mountain. It turns out he's a photographer, and he does like National Geographic stuff, and he doesn't like this place because it's interfering with the wildlife and the nature. And his concerns early on is that them taking down X number of trees to put in more facilities is actually destabilizing the mountain as far as avalanches go, because it's, it's removing some of the natural blocks and things like that. I don't know how accurate any of this shit is. I just kind of take it at face value here.
Yeah, it sounds like one of those things that the directors are like, this makes sense. Like, you can follow the logic here of they are chopping down trees that are in their way of the view from the resort up to the top of the mountain. So it makes sense that when snow starts coming down the mountain, it now has an open path to hit the lodge.
Yeah.
Whether that's scientifically accurate or not, I don't know, but it sounds like it makes sense.
So he's concerned. He wants to talk to Shelby, which he goes and does. And that's the final thing that interrupts the lunch that makes it not happen. Is that he's like, hey, no, we're talking about this now. This is dangerous. So
well, we also get a sequence of the speed skier named Bruce. He does a little side trail where he's not supposed to. He starts skiing down and causes a little mini avalanche.
Well, yeah, this is one of the things about the movie is that once they build up to the avalanche, so it does this, and then there's another little thing later that basically are like it's almost like, you know how in a movie where there's going to be a big earthquake and these little tremors that are saying, hey, there's a big earthquake coming. But as far as I know, I don't think that this happens with avalanches where there's little things that are building up to one, right?
Yeah, I mean, I vaguely remember something similar with like rock slides where you get like a few like tremors and boulders falling down, and then that's just kind of a signal that, oh, there's one on the way. But it's not something where it's like, it's going to happen within the next 24 hours. It's just to show that it's unstable, which, to be fair, they say throughout the movie that this mountain is highly unstable because nobody is doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, which is fine, but it felt kind of artificial to me that they were trying to build up as if there was like a rising meter to an avalanche happening, when in reality, eventually it's a plane that causes it, and that's not something that happens naturally. That's just,
See, for me, it didn't feel like it was a rising meter. I think it was one of those things where it just kept on wanting to fake out the audience. It kept wanting to be like, oh, here we go. This is it. This is happening. Nah, we're just messing with you. Maybe next time.
This is a pretty funny scene, though, because the blonde skier is doing his own little private skiing practice over on the other side of the mountain, and this little mini avalanche happens, and he's sort of like skiing away from it, and he eventually jumps onto a tree and holds onto the tree while this little mini avalanche just finishes off. And I thought, oh, that's funny. And obviously this is a little tease for later, because later on he's going to be skiing away from the real avalanche. And obviously, like, I get it. You're doing a movie about an avalanche and there's a ski resort involved. You have to do a scene where a skier is literally trying to ski away from it. That's just too funny an idea not to do.
I actually appreciate in this movie, as much as I say I think that the special effects and especially the avalanche effects are awful, they got an actual speed skier and they shot him very well. I think that the sequences of him going down the hill, they showed, no, he is skilled. He is doing this properly. So kudos on that.
It's the least they could do, right? Is to actually get a real skier to pull off some moves as a stuntman.
I mean, you say the least they could do, but I could fully imagine going lower than that. I could fully imagine them being like, hey, Carl, have you skied before? Get on camera.
New World Pictures or B-movie, but I feel like the standard of a B-movie in 1978 versus the straight-to-streaming shit you get these days was a lot higher back then. These days, it'd be like, oh, let's just green screen everything. Let's just... We'll have a JPEG in the background.
I mean, you're right. And this movie also does that at some point. But, I mean, looking at the wiki page for this, it's got a $6.5 million budget, apparently. And then the box office was only $87,000. So...
I can believe a $6 million budget for this.
Yeah, that sounds right. I'm just more so shocked at the $87,000, which makes me think it was that thing where they like contractually put it in like 2 theaters and then we're like, all right, send it over to the TV stations. We're done with it now.
So it's introduced these various characters. Shelby kind of, doesn't take Robert Forster's character's Nick, right? Just so I can call him that. Nick's got all these concerns about the mountain, and Shelby's like, nah. Like, I'm not trying to damage the environment. I'm building this place so people can enjoy it and see it and really appreciate it. Like, I'm not doing anything dangerous. Don't stop. Because they do the thing where they've got like another expert there who's like the guy who actually does the safety checks, and he's like, no, it's fine. And Nick's like, yeah, but if you actually went up and sat in this part of the mountain, like, it feels off. Like, something's different. Like, he can sense it in his blood. Something's coming.
The difference between what your numbers say and what my heart feels.
But ignore all the dangerous stuff for now, because now we have the party. There's like a fancy dinner and gala with some flaming hot souffles or whatever they are. I don't know what.
It doesn't matter.
I don't know.
It's like 50 of them though.
Yeah. So everyone's dancing, whatever. But the big thing before this party kicks off, though, is that Robert Forster's character Nick runs into Caroline, right? So keep in mind, Shelby's invited Caroline here because he wants to try and get his marriage back together. But Nick runs into her when she's in the pool, and they start talking about, I don't know, this place, blah, 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 whatever. But eventually, there's clearly a bit of chemistry, and she's like, oh, you should come to the gala thing tonight. And he's like, maybe I'll show up. And he does show up, right? That leads us into him showing up, and he comes over and asks her to dance. And I have to admit, one of the first big laughs I had of this movie was Shelby, like, just staring with his mouth ajar, just being like, or agape, just being like, he's dancing with my wife. Are they a thing? Are they into each other? What's this? What's this now? I'm not happy about this.
I actually got my first laugh, like, same exact sequence, but just before that, where Mia Farrow says, oh, would you like to dance? Clearly talking to Robert Forster, but then Rock Hudson's like, oh, yes, what? Oh, him. Okay.
He's so jealous that as soon as they sit down from dancing later in the scene, he grabs her arm, again, like a child who's in trouble, and says, oh, now we're going to dance. And she's like, no, I'm tired. I've run out of breath. Said, no, we're dancing now, woman. And starts like dancing with her sort of aggressively. No, we dance. You wife, me husband, we dance.
Beat the chest. Yeah, no, I mean, again, this entire sequence just more so furthers the idea of, you know, he gets whatever he wants. He doesn't ever take no for an answer, which is creepy in its own right, but I don't think the movie ever goes irredeemable with it. He's always like at the end of this sequence when she finally lays down the law and says like, no, the whole reason we broke up is because I felt entrapped by you. I felt like I couldn't be my own person.
I'd like to add, we get to that point in the conversation because he straight up just starts asking, wait, you just met Nick today. Why are you dancing with Nick? Really? You're into Nick? Like, he gets really just upfront about his jealousy here, which prompts the rest of the conversation. It's kind of silly. Some of it's a little bit funny. I think you're right. They try and keep him as a flawed character who's still a good person ultimately, because he wants to help people when they're in trouble, and he's not trying to. He's not quite the mayor in Jaws. They can't.
Right.
And I feel like if they went further with this, it might actually be an interesting character where, he's adamant when he says, no, I'm not building this place because I want to ruin the nature. I'm building this place because I want people to enjoy this nature. I think it's amazing, and I want people to, we're only taking a little bit of it away so we can build this place. But they never really go heavy into those themes and this idea of where the line's being crossed, Whereas the mayor in Jaws, to draw the obvious comparison, is like, no, he just wants to make money and he doesn't care about the safety of anyone.
Yeah, I think they could have gone a little bit further with this idea of exploiting the nature, because you build one ski resort, that's theoretically fine, you're not upsetting the balance of nature too much, but then they show that he's still building stuff even like further up the mountain. He's got this ski lift going on. It does feel like even if he doesn't intend on ruining the nature, his own greed would just end up ruining it regardless.
Yeah there's probably more you could have done with those ideas and themes, but obviously this is not a movie that is concerned with themes.
What do you mean deeper messaging? Our deeper messaging is never get onto a two-seater plane. That's our deeper messaging.
So Robert Forster tries to leave, and Mia Farrow catches him and says, hey, can I go with you? So she goes back to his cabin. We don't even see a moment with a kiss or anything. We just see them hug, and then the next morning we see her wake up there. So yeah, they had sex.
Again. Fantastic line here. They're just standing. He gets her a beer. They just stand in front of the window as it's snowing out, and he just says, can I give you a big hug? And then they just hug. And yes, the implication is sex happens, but like, it's the most platonic introduction to a sex scene I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, I cannot tell you how little chemistry that any of these three people in this love triangle have with each other. Right? Yeah. Which is fine for Rock Hudson and Robert Forster because it's not meant to be a complete three-way love triangle, but neither one of them have chemistry with Mia Farrow.
Well, no, I think it's still bad for Rock Hudson and Robert Forster because it doesn't feel like they're really at odds either.
Oh,
like,
that's fair. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, they argue with each other, but it doesn't feel like they have this deep-seated aggression towards each other. It just feels like, hey, this guy's a pain in my ass occasionally, but like I've only ever met him twice.
Or even an awkwardness because they're kind of friends, but now there's this wedge between them, which is the other way you could go with it. But that's not there either. Yeah.
No, not at all. There is one sequence that we skipped over slightly, and it's the reason why Mia Farrow woke up alone. As he's finished talking to.
Well, I wasn't done with the previous night yet because there's still other stuff to talk about with our characters.
Oh, it's fine, but this was like during the day, yeah. As he's finished talking to Rock Hudson's character, Robert Forster goes out into a truck and breaks open a box of explosives and steals like 2 RPGs that are used to.
Yeah, they set this up before because he tells the safety guy, "Hey, fire a couple of things to like test the snow." And I'm sure this is a done thing. I'm sure this was researched. Mm-hmm. Admittedly, part of me thought, is Robert Forster going to set off the Avalanche by firing these missiles? Because it feels like a dangerous thing to do. But I guess the way it is, it's kind of like how like firefighters might start little fires to control the spread of a big fire. Mm-hmm. These little detonations are more about testing the snow in a safe. I assume he knows what he's doing, right? I'm assuming he's not just blindly firing into the mountain. But it felt dangerous to me when he's firing off. This is the next day he's firing off these rockets.
Well, again, that's with the first avalanche that happened with the skier. I think this is the second time around where they're poking the audience and they say, hey, we know it's been 40 minutes. We know we haven't started the disaster yet.
Coming.
But like, it's coming. Check this out. It looks like it's happening now.
Because while they're all asleep in the night, there is like a snowstorm that blows off a bunch of the benches and stuff, which is the second thing saying, hey, things are ramping up. The tension's getting up. Now there's a storm, you know? But we have to talk about the other characters though, because at the gala, skier man, right, blonde skier man, asked the figure skater lady to dance, right, and then Tina, the girlfriend, sitting there just looking miserable and just pretending to be okay, right, and you know they're dancing a bit and they're being a little flirtatious with like they're talking about skiing and techniques, but it sounds like innuendo. They're like, oh yeah, you have to be quick to stay on top, or you have to.
They're saying like, oh, how do you like to fall? Oh, I like to take it on my back. It's like, oh, okay,
all right. So a little bit later, we see blonde skier man with the figure skater, and they're in his really fancy like room. This place it's got like stairs and everything. He's been given like basically a whole house to himself to stay in at this ski resort. And yeah, I don't know, the actual like there's actually quite a long scene of them like undressing and like flirting more, and they sort of crawl under the covers in a weird way where they're not just naked with each other. Because I thought it was I genuinely thought they were trying to avoid nudity, and then there's another topless scene like 2 minutes later, so it didn't really matter. But the way they kind of like both like where the camera's looking down at the top half of the bed, and we just see the lump of them two coming up through the covers, and then they poke their heads out the top.
The only explanation is they lifted up the covers from the foot of the bed, climbed up through it, and then came out the top. That is the only explanation that makes sense here.
And I just question why.
70s, man. We did things differently.
Why? If you're going to have rough animal sex, just have rough animal sex. There's no need for this tomfoolery.
It's still PG, Pete. Got to make this safe for cable TV.
Right? But here's where it gets good. Is we cut to Tina, the girlfriend, who's on her way to this house area. Right?
Yeah, back to the lodge.
And she's walking through there's these balcony areas outside that go at these set of stairs, and then eventually up to the door that goes into this place. And what really got me is that she starts undressing as if she's about to go to him for sex, but she starts doing it while she's still outside in the balcony in the snow.
Yeah.
So she takes off like a scarf and like a jacket, and she just drops it in the balcony. I'm like, it's snowing! Why wouldn't you wait until you're inside to start undressing? This is weird.
I think she's pretty clearly drunk at this point. I'll give her that. I think that if, you know, in her drunken mind, she's like, yeah, we're going to get it on. And she's like overestimating how far away the house is. And she's like, yeah, you know, I'm right outside. Meanwhile, she's still got 50 feet to go. So
she gets inside. She walks up the stairs, sees blonde skater man with the figure skater. And she screams and runs away out into the snow, and it cuts away pretty quick, but the implication certainly is that he just stays and has sex with the figure skater.
Oh yeah, no doubt. When she's running away, we also get the ex-husband the TV host guy tries to stop her and like comfort her, but she's like, no, let me go, I gotta go. And then she runs back inside. He grabs her scarf, and that is the last of their relationship that will be explored in this movie.
Doesn't matter. Does not matter at all.
Does not matter. Also, sorry, just one thing I wanted to bring up here, because you keep on saying the figure skater girl.
Yeah.
Did you remember there was another figure skater girl?
I did, and the only reason why I even remembered her is because when we first see her, when they're introducing the two figure skaters, she's figure skating first, and I thought it was Mia Farrow because she looks so much like her.
Yeah, no, I had the same thought. I'm like, oh, Mia Farrow's a professional figure skater. Wait a minute.
This is a different character who is only going to skate once more in the movie, and otherwise that's it. She has nothing else to do.
Yeah, so because this is a pro sports thing that's going on here, they have professional figure skating going on, and for some reason they have a whole subplot about how this blonde figure skater, not the one who sleeps with the skier, is like totally freaked out by this other figure skater because she's so confident and she can get inside the other one's head, and she is like falling over, and then she has her coach come in and be like, hey, when you're in the middle of your spin, you just leave the rest of the world behind, don't even think about what's going on.
I do wonder if like this and then like the Tina and ex-husband stuff, I wonder if there was more of this stuff that was just cut, like if they shot more stuff and then it was cut out of the edit to get down to 90 minutes because they thought, let's make it brisk, let's make it as brisk as we can, because
I mean, if there was, I'd love to know what it was, because I have no idea how these plots could have gone. There is no, like, sometimes when they have to cut stuff, there's still a hint of it in the cut. You can still tell, like, they wanted to go in this direction, but I have no idea where any of these cut subplots would go.
Also, these figure skaters, they're out on, like, the ice, like, I say ice rink, it's maybe because they're actually in a frozen mountain, it's probably actually just like a little lake or something.
Like a pond or something.
Right? Yeah. But when it first cut to her skiing, I thought, she must be freezing. She's wearing like panties and a top. It's like a turtleneck and then panties, and I'm like, surely you should be wearing some like like an actual leotard over your legs here, because at the very least, because you must be freezing. Anyway,
look, it's the 70s, Pete.
You can't just say it's the 70s to everything I bring up.
I know I can't, but at that point specifically, though, I do feel like, especially in pro sports, there was a much bigger push to like, okay, guys can wear whatever they want, but girls, we need to see as much of their legs as humanly possible in every single sport. But
anyway, next morning is what I really want to talk about with this whole skier and Tina
Good
plot.
Lord. I'm happy this plot got as far as it did, and I'm so happy it stopped where it did as well, because it makes it all the funnier.
So, Skier Man comes down in the morning, right, and Tina's there, despite the fact that she caught him cheating on her, the previous night. She's made him breakfast, sausage and scrambled egg, and she's got like coffee and like maybe a drink of milk or something for him. And he sits down, and she says, "Oh, did you sleep well?" And then she says, "Oh, what would you rate her out of 10?" And she's like, 7, 8,
and he's just not answering.
9? Was she that good? And he's like, I don't know who has it more worse, because jealousy's such a pain in the ass. And
the whole time she's holding this apple, and he's just like, if you're gonna throw that at me, just do it already.
And she's like, it wouldn't hurt enough. And then when he says one of the other lines that he says, she picks up a knife and like threatens him with it. And then I could not believe his reaction. Well, this makes a difference from threatening to cut yourself. And I'm like, wait a minute, how toxic is this relationship?
So bad.
That she has been repeatedly jealous enough that she's been suicidal, and he's just nonchalantly sitting there going, "You're ruining my breakfast, you jealous bitch." Like, that is the demeanor that he is responding to everything she says with, and she's flying off the handle. She should have left this guy ages ago, seemingly, and he is just like, "Oh, I can't believe you're bothering me with your suicidal problems and your jealousy.
Today's the day of my big race, and you dare bring up my infidelities? Now, of all times?" And
if you had told me that after she caught him cheating, that he'd be the one to throw a drink in her face, I would have been like, what? But no, he does. She's threatening him with the knife, and he splashes her in the face with whatever the drink is. And
like milk.
Yeah, and then grabs her by the arms and says that, I can't remember what he says when he grabs her, but
I don't even think he says anything, does he? He just like takes her down to the couch and holds her down.
But he picks her up, he picks up her jacket, throws her out the door to basically say it's over, go away, and she's distraught with grief. And
she's literally saying "I love you" as he is pushing her out the door.
It's like I thought the Mia Farrow being grabbed by the arm and kissed was like awkward. This was like, oh no, this is just like, it's not abuse in the sense that he's been abusive towards her in like a direct way, but as far as like mental abuse goes from being treated horribly, this is like, like, I mean, she clearly needs help. She's someone to like give her some sense and tell her to get away from him, because this is so toxic.
Before this plot, it was obvious that every subplot just terminates before it's done. I thought for sure it was going to come back around and say, oh no, she realizes how good she had it with the TV host guy. And then there's a point very soon after this where the TV host is doing an interview with the skier, and I thought he was going to call her out. Or call him out. I thought he was going to say like, well, it's your big moment. Do you want to tell us how much of a horrible douche you are? And like, just say that. But no, he plays it straight. He plays it professional. And it just feels like nothing in this scene ever comes back except for one shot, which is insane in its own right.
Well, two shots, because when just before his race starts, two women come up and start talking to the blonde skier, and there is one shot of Tina seeing this and be like, oh, he's flirting with women again, and she storms off. So there's that one little moment, and then the final moment, which we'll just talk about now, is when the avalanche is happening. She's in a room about to down a bottle of pills to kill herself because he's done this to her, and dramatic irony is that she didn't need to, because then the entire wall comes down with snow.
Yeah, and she is assumed dead. We never see her again.
Yeah. Wouldn't surprise me if there was a whole plot after this where she survived and maybe her ex-husband saved her or something to give it like a payoff, but nah.
Nah, I mean, well, we know what happened to the ex-husband later, so...
Yes. So to
be fair, I just want to point out, that was the over-the-top silly death part one for me.
That was part one, okay. I can see that.
Yeah, it's the insanity of, like, not only is it just like, oh, she's taking a handful of pills. Like, she dumps the whole bottle of a fresh thing of pills. So she has at least 50 pills in her hand.
Yes.
And she's looking to the glass of water, and then not 3 seconds pass, and the wall just crumbles down, and we never see her again. That's incredible to me that they would, like, it's so, I don't want to say, like, mean-spirited, but it's so, like, just disjointed in we're going to we've shown all these other people dying in the avalanche before this. We're going to show somebody on the verge of suicide who then gets crushed by an avalanche. It feels like a bad, like, 13-year-old edgy joke, you know?
Yeah, because typically you'd want this character to survive, and her arc by the end would be that she's realizing that she was, you know, a fool for wanting to die, and now she's thankful she survived the tragedy. You know, she came close to an actual death, not by her own making, and is now thankful to be alive. Like, that could be the arc, potentially, that you might do in a movie like this. Instead, she was going to go through with it and then died anyway seconds later. So, yeah, it's really weird. I mean, we're basically at the point to talk about the avalanche now, because everyone just goes off to do the things that they were doing in that morning, right?
Yeah, so the big thing is that Robert Forster goes and he starts firing off the cannon thing to cause little mini avalanches in order to stop the big one from happening. And then, meanwhile...
Well, I don't think it's to stop it. I think it's just to test to see how the fall is, like, to see how the mountain reacts to it. I don't think it's I don't think it would stop anything, but yeah.
Well, I think maybe it might, like, lessen up the load of, like, how much weight is up top. Because he does aim, like, right for the top of the mountain, pretty much. But no, the other thing that happened much earlier on is Robert Forster pointed out that the sounds, because obviously if you make a big enough boom or anything like that, that's the kind of stuff that causes an avalanche, the vibrations. So we get this long thing of all these big trucks and stuff trying to repair the benches and everything that was broken during the storm the night before. But then B, we also get this snowmobile race throughout the area. We get all these cheering crowds, these loud people. Like, it's just showing how much we're pushing the barrier more and more to there's going to be an avalanche during this scene.
Yeah, the snowmobile race doesn't go very well, though. One of them crashes and tips over, so another snowmobile crashes into that one.
You say one of them. I'm pretty sure I counted like 5 people who do front flips over the front of their snowmobiles throughout this sequence.
Only one was memorable to me. What can I say?
That's fair, yeah. Because the rest of them, nothing happens. There's no reason for them to flip. It's just all of a sudden they're like, whoop, I guess I hit the brake.
So, the avalanche happens because there's a plane flying up and the storm at the top of the mountain.
Which was called in by Rock Hudson's character, by Shelby. He specifically needed some paperwork or a file or something to be flown in immediately. So he's just telling this guy, like, yeah, get a pilot who will fly in no matter how dangerous it is.
Yeah, because there's a couple of lines when he's talking to his wife at the start, or his ex-wife, about how, there's some trouble because some of the people he submitted money to for their campaigns to approve this, build up here in the mountain are now in trouble for corruption. And he's not corrupt himself, but he's connected to it. So that's what all the paperwork's about. He's doing stuff to do with that.
Yeah, he's going to be investigated probably. So he's just covering his bases. I also want to say right before this plane hits, they do the moment that I decided that there was no good editing in this movie, like just period. And that is they intercut back and forth very rapidly between the airplane coasting through the mountains and the female figure skater, the one who was all self-conscious about herself. And it's, I guess, supposed to show like some level of dichotomy of like, oh, this beautiful, peaceful dance, and then this horrible thing that's happening. But like, it doesn't. And add on top of it, there's this orchestral music that's playing for the figure skating. And you'd think, oh, well, they could do a thing where they have the orchestral music playing over the whole thing. No, they just cut the music every time they cut to the plane. So you get music, plane sounds, music, plane sounds, music, plane sounds. About that fast throughout this whole scene, and it is so awfully edited, I can barely describe it.
Yep. So that goes to the avalanche itself. There's a lot of shots of like sort of superimposed like clouds of snow over things happening.
It's so bad. It's so like early green screen, but like they didn't do it right. It's just not good.
So it's, like the skier like gets chased down the mountain. He tries to keep speeding up to try and get away from it. He eventually doesn't. He does eventually get buried in snow, but that's their big set piece moment here, is him skiing away from it. But of course we get it hitting the pond where the figure skating is happening, and all the various little buildings, their windows caving in. Eventually the big main ski resort where Rock Hudson's mother is having more. Yep. It's implied she's an alcoholic. We don't really get much of it, but she always wants a Bloody Mary. And the windows all come flying in with the snow. She's with the accountant dude that works at the place.
Dude, I had no idea what that plot was supposed to be. There's a thing where there's a bookkeeper. He calls himself a bookkeeper.
A bookkeeper, that's what it was, yeah.
Okay. Who is just following around the mom, supposedly trying to keep her busy for some reason. And by the end, I guess they have like a friendship or possibly more. I don't know what the hell was going on with that one.
I don't think it was more than a friend. I mean, maybe they were going for that. I didn't get that.
I mean, the only thing that got me was at the very, very end, she gets loaded up into a car, and she says like, oh, whatever, McDade, because that's his last name. And then he's like, no, my real name is like, my first name is whatever. He says like, call me by my first name. And that's the only thing that gave me like, was that supposed to be like more than friendship? I don't know.
I feel like you're reaching with that one, but
I'm trying to give the movie a little bit of credit anywhere because it didn't deserve it.
I mean, honestly, like all this stuff is pretty fast. The only thing I really want to talk about during the avalanche itself is the kitchen, because the kitchen antics are amazing. The two things that stick out in my mind in the kitchen, other than people just flying back, is a waitress in the kitchen is sent sliding over the counter. So there's like this central counter in the middle of the kitchen, and she goes sliding down it when she gets hit with the wave of snow or whatever it is.
There's a gas leak which gets ignited by like a pilot flame on the oven.
I thought this was before that, but fair enough. Yeah, okay, fair enough. If it's the gas leak moment, then that goes boom. She goes sliding down this. I think it's during the avalanche though, where one of the chefs tumbles into a big hot boiling pot of soup.
Yeah, that's there.
So everyone else is freezing to death, and he's like burning and screaming like ah.
I mean, I get it because it's a thing that would happen. That makes sense. Yeah. But like, it's so over the top that it's just like, oh no, he tumbles into the pile or the giant pot of gumbo. Of course he does. He can't be crushed by the snow. He has to get third-degree burns before he gets crushed by the snow.
It'll be cooled down pretty quick, though. At least that's
Yeah, true.
So you want saving grace?
Because the mother is also stuck in the lodge, apparently McDade, the bookkeeper guy, smells the gas. So when she goes to like light a cigarette, he stops her. And I guess this gas is causing them to like asphyxiate even after it catches fire. Like more of it's just pouring out, because it very quickly their plot becomes, even though they're in this big room, they start like falling asleep. They start running out of air. So
I
theoretically, there's a gas leak.
I think it's a combination of that and the fact that they're just closed in, I guess. So there's no oxygen.
It just seems like a huge area for you to burn through for what feels like maybe an hour.
Yeah, I don't know. Like Rock Hudson's main thing is like digging in to get to her. That's kind of his main thing in this back part. Saving them in this room where they're asphyxiating is one of the main things going on in this part of the movie. The other main thing going on is that just before the avalanche started, these parents and a kid are going up the ski lift, right? So the two parents get on one chair themselves. The kid's not going to go, but then this stranger kneels down and says,
It's TV host.
No, I know it's a TV host, but to the kid, he's a stranger.
Oh, yeah, no one. Yeah, he should not be talking to this kid.
Yeah, but he kneels down and says, hey, how about it, son? Do you want to come up? All right, and he gets on. And to be fair, there is a moment just as they're sitting in the chair where the parents turn around and say, "You sure you want to do this, honey?" And he's like, "Yeah." And so they're okay with it. They know what's happening. He's not just doing this behind their. I mean, he's literally behind their back, but they know that he's taking the kid up with them. So that's fair enough. But the initial moment where he starts talking to him, it's like you're just asking a random kid to go up with you. So they're on the ski lift when the avalanche happens, and the parents seemingly are just killed pretty quickly. But what it leaves for the aftermath is that him and this kid are dangling because the chair's sort of fallen off and they're just sort of dangling from the cable. And that's a big set piece here, is that, okay, we have to deal with that. So there's a whole bit where a bunch of firefighters and rescue people come out with this sort of handheld trampoline to catch them falling, right? So they're holding it underneath them, and the TV presenter's like, okay, listen, son, Alan, whatever your name is.
Jason.
Jason. X to Jason. Jason, like, you go first, son. Like, you go down and you be brave, because I won't have the courage unless I see you do it first. You just close your eyes and fall. So the kid falls, and we get a shot of him landing in the thing, and like, okay, kid's all right. And they're like, okay, now you. And the TV presenter's pretty scared. But it just so happens that right as this is happening, the cable for the ski lift, right, which is electrified, it starts, like, a jolt of electricity goes through it. So he gets sparked, and he falls.
Was it a spark? Sorry, I thought it was just that the cable was like barely holding on because of the avalanche, and then it just finally gave way.
No, because it cuts to like some sparks at the end of it, so I assumed there was like a jolt of power going through it.
I mean, either way, it's exactly the same result.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, the point is that he falls before he means to. And even though it looks, when it cuts between him and the trampoline, it looks like he's falling straight down into it. But then there's just a shot where he hits the snow instead and is dead.
Okay. I feel awful because that entire time you're saying the scene, I'm giggling like an idiot. It's such a quick cut because, like you said, we do this whole slow motion fall and we see him landing in the trampoline. Like, he is a foot away from it before we finally cut away to a shot where all of a sudden he's just like, it's like a Family Guy sketch where he's just on the ground with a thud and he's just not moving anymore. It's so sudden, and I loved every second of it, despite the fact it's the death of a character who wholly did not deserve it. God, it was funny.
It's good. I think between Tina trying to commit suicide and then just getting the wall come down in snow, this guy's death, and then I think the waitress in the kitchen flying across the counter is really funny. Actually, and we've skipped over a scene here that I do really want to, because we mentioned it earlier, but I want to talk about it, is that after the avalanche hits, obviously they call in the authorities, right? It's like, okay, so whatever town's at the bottom of the mountain, we see the fire engines come out and the ambulances come out, and it stays with them as they're driving through the town, right? So they're not even up the mountain yet. They're still in the town. There's still stores and, regular roads.
They just pulled out of the fire station.
Right. Yeah, they're just around normal civilization. This is where everyone's driving to and from work in the morning. And just randomly, off the back of one of the fire engines, this big box that says first aid just falls off the back of the truck. And I'm like, what's happening here? And then the ambulance that's driving behind them has to skid to try and dodge it, and they end up going off the road.
They skid, which causes a police car behind them to skid even harder.
It's a chain reaction, and then eventually there's a shot from inside a store where a car comes through the window and the front wall comes down. And the reason why I'm mentioning this part specifically is because this was clearly a fake wall that was built so they could demolish it, because it was so flimsy and thin and clearly not the actual front of a store, because the actual front of a building is thick, it's brick, it's or whatever, this was plywood and cheap shit just coming down. But why was all this? Why was there suddenly this little disaster on the road right out of the fire engine or the fire station? They're not even going up the hills yet to get to the resort where you could say, oh, there's been a snowstorm, these roads are dangerous, they're icy. This is the roads in the main street of the town.
The only thing that I could think that this would make sense with is if they really made a point of saying nobody can get up to the resort because of the storm last night. It's a thing where it's we're completely locked in. It's just us. Rescue services won't be able to make it for a day at most. We're the only things we got. But because they do make it up there seemingly within an hour of it happening, there is no reason for this scene. It just comes out of nowhere. And I'm sorry, you're talking about that flimsy storefront. It went by so quick I didn't actually even notice it, but several of the window panes are falling out before the dude even hits the glass. It's that flimsy.
I think, and what gets me is even if you're saying, oh, the conditions are bad, but it doesn't start with a slide or a skid. It starts with this random box of stuff falling off the back of the truck, which just makes them look like a bunch of incompetent fools.
Yeah, pretty much. And then it's weird because later on, the fact that with that trying to catch the TV host in the net thing, they just miss. It looks like they've got him right on there, and they still somehow missed. This movie, I think, does a really bad job of trying to put rescue services as competent.
Yeah,
I feel like they're kind of making them out to be complete idiots.
And what you just said before about how you could easily do part of this movie, part of the jeopardy could be, the services can't get up here to help. They're on their own for a couple of days until they can clear the roads or whatever, which again puts more stakes on everyone trying to save everyone up in the mountain. But no, like you say, they just get there seemingly as quickly as they possibly could and everything's fine. And it's not until later that there's all of a sudden some bad stuff on the roads on the way back that causes a new disaster, which we'll get to. So which I guess we're getting to anyway. So they rescue Rock Hudson's mum. She looks like she's dying, but she ends up waking up and she's fine.
Yeah, they use some of the dynamite from the explosives crate in order to try to blow away some of the snow. When that runs out, they just start digging. And we get this sequence where she passes out and McDade can't wake her, so then he starts digging from the other direction. They manage to meet up, and it looks like she's dead, but then one shot later, she's being loaded up in the back of an ambulance saying oh, she's weak, but she's okay. And then she pulls off the mask and says, "Get me a Bloody Mary." So she's fine.
Yeah. So, and Mia Farrow gets in the ambulance with her to go with her to the hospital, right? Fine. So they leave, and then maybe the trampoline thing happens next. I can't remember the order of events. There. But there's some stuff.
We also get the part where Bruce the skier, he was trapped under the snow. They find him. I don't think he survives.
No, he doesn't. They do this whole thing where you're seeing his face under the snow, and they're sort of putting these poles down to test if there's anyone under the snow, and you see it come by right in front of his face and then goes up. And then for some reason, someone tests the exact same place again because it happens a second time.
Right.
But then they find him, and then they're just all upset that he's dead because he's frozen to death. And
everyone's like, "No, Bruce!" And they're genuinely sad about it. All these girls and stuff that are around, they're like, "Oh God, we can't believe he's dead." Which makes sense if there's a big athlete who dies in your area. I get you're sad, but from a what we've seen as an audience standpoint, it's so weird that he's the one that's getting the grief.
It's kind of like that joke you get in some sitcoms and stuff when a ladies' man dies and then at the funeral there's just lots of babes like all crying because he's got all these ladies in his life. It's kind of that kind of vibe for it, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
But so some of this stuff happens after the ambulance is left with the mum in it and Mia Farrow in it, right? And then out of nowhere, one of the other vehicles comes back and Rock Hudson's like, why are you back up here? He's like, oh, there's something in the road. There's some snow's falling or some shit. They can't get through. And he's like, wait, did the ambulance with my mum get through? Cut to that ambulance on the road driving. And...
yeah. No, go ahead, Pete. Describe exactly what happens here.
I don't know if I can. I even know the car the ambulance skids and then it just goes off the edge of the mountain. Mia Farrow, luckily or conveniently, gets thrown out of the vehicle as it's going over the edge, and the mum and the driver of the ambulance just go off the side in the vehicle until it lands in a pool at the bottom and then explodes.
It's the explosion that really gets me, because it's not instantaneous. Like, it falls, Mia Farrow's dangling from the edge of this bridge, and then like 10 seconds pass, and then giant fiery explosion. It felt like that scene in Groundhog Day, where the cameraman steps up and be like, well, he could have survived that, and then it explodes. He's like, oh, okay, well, never mind.
Do you know what it is that you were talking earlier how the Tina, who was going to commit suicide and then dies instantly, almost feels mean-spirited. This mum character, we had the whole fake out where it looks like she stops breathing, but then it turns out she's fine, right? They give her a little bit of CPR and she's fine, and they put her in an ambulance only to just kill her suddenly minutes later.
Yep.
And so we actually get the moment with Rock Hudson looking and thinking that his mum's dead twice. We get it the first time when he thinks she's dead when they find her by digging through the snow, and then here at the end he looks over, like he does a whole thing where him and Robert Forster show up to save her because Mia Farrow's like dangling off the edge of the cliff, right? And they come up and like Rock Hudson climbs down next to her, which I thought was stupid. If you're going to drop a rope anyway, why do you have to go down first? That's weird.
Yeah.
But Robert Forster drops down a rope, they climb up, and then once they're up, Rock Hudson looks over the edge down at the car that's sinking into this little tar pit or whatever it is. And he's got this look in his face. He's like, oh no, my mum's dead. And I'm like, we already had this. 15 minutes ago, you did the exact same look.
I'm going to tell you exactly how to fix this final scene. It's so perfect that they're going to reshoot the movie just to have this ending. You have the mom die or be saved, doesn't matter, but regardless, she doesn't go in the ambulance. She dies or lives in the asphyxiation room. The person in the ambulance is Bruce. He survives. The skier survives.
I'm glad you said the skier because I did not know who Bruce was, but go on.
Well, I only remember it because in the scene where Tina dies, she's wearing a shirt that just says Bruce across it. So that stuck with me. But no, Bruce survives, but he's in critical condition. He has to get into the ambulance. Meanwhile, simultaneously, both Robert Forster and Rock Hudson meet up with Mia Farrow and say, we need you to get out of here. It's not safe for you here. You're not, like, we just want to make sure that you're going to be okay. And they send her in the ambulance to go down the mountain as well. That gets them both in the same car. It gives them reason for Mia Farrow to be in there. It then makes it so that the Bruce death comes and it feels good because he's such an asshole. All of that lines up. That's how you fix this scene. But having it be the mother, like you said, it's just the same thing twice, but even more mean-spirited because not only does the car crash, it explodes.
And that's basically the movie. There's like one scene after this where it's Mia Farrow going back to the resort after some time has passed, we don't know how much, and she comes in and Rock Hudson... Well, actually, she runs into Robert Forster first, and basically they just say goodbye, so long. Like, we're not even going to pretend that we might have a relationship now. It's just, nah, we're both going back to our lives. Ta-ta.
I felt like I had to rewatch this scene because I swear to God they were having completely separate conversations with each other. He's just like, oh, I like you just the way you are. And she's like, all right, take care of yourself. And he's like, he says like some other line that doesn't even follow up and take care of yourself. And then they just walk away.
Yeah, it almost sounds like him saying, I like you just the way you are, is for her to respond with, oh, unlike my husband that I left for always wanting to control me, you're perfect for me because you want me to be me. But then she says, goodbye, I'll never see you again.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then she goes in to speak to Rock Hudson, who's just looking at the wreckage of his dream and just being like, yeah, give me champagne. And that's it. And then
Well, she comes out and she's like, look, I love you. And he's like, yeah, I love you too. But then they both realize, like, yeah, but this is never going to work. Like, as much as we care about each other, we suck for each other.
Is this wreckage a metaphor for their marriage? I mean, that feels like a bit generous to give it to that, but...
I mean, for me, the way I saw it is that the wreckage is directly linked to Rock Hudson's life completely falling apart. Not only did he sink all of his money into this, he didn't get his ex-wife back, and his mom died. Like, everything is gone for him.
His sexy secretary that he has sex with is probably dead as well.
That, or she just is never going to come back here because she has deep linked trauma. That being said, there is one point in here where when Rock Hudson first walks back into the lodge, she interrupts him and basically gives the lowdown of like, oh, here's what's happening. We don't know where your mom is, da-da-da. And like, I'm sorry to the actress, not your best delivery. It was like the most wooden thing of like, oh, I don't know what's going on. Everything's just all messed up. And Rock Hudson basically has to carry the role of being like, okay, well, how about you leave and I'll take care of the overacting here.
Oh, did the secretary survive? I couldn't remember if she did.
Yeah, she did. Or at least she talked to Rock Hudson and then we never saw her again. So I assume she's fine.
Ah, well, no payoff then. That's a shame.
Nah.
Nothing gets a payoff. Not really.
She specifically says, okay, I'll be waiting naked in the hot tub.
Yeah, because I thought, okay, we're setting up, like, the Tina skier thing so that they can both have a conclusion to their story. But no, they both die kind of separately, just suddenly. The TV presenter thing, it feels like it's got nothing to do with Tina. He's just got this weird random plot with a kid in the back chunk.
I think that's really the biggest thing, is that every single person in that weird abusive love triangle with Tina and like the radio host and all that, all of them die. Every single one of them is almost immediately gone. Bruce is the only one who survives, the skier. But even then, as soon as he's found, he's dead. So none of them have any furtherance to their stories. It's just completely dead.
Mia Farrow was basically in no danger until the very end after a contrived new problem pops up. Which, okay, technically, yes, the two men have to work together to go and save her. But it's such just a tacked on thing at the very end. It's not like the entire third act is like, oh, she's trapped somewhere and they're going to have to actually work together. Instead, it's just this little thing at the end where they have to go and save her. But like I said, all it took was someone throwing down a rope, so it doesn't even need both of them. Like, Rock Hudson just is unnecessary there. He doesn't need to be there.
For me, the biggest problem with the final scene is that it has nothing to do with the Avalanche. If this movie was called Snowstorm or Icy Roads, yeah, no, that's fine. That's a fine ending for that movie, but that's not what it is. This is Avalanche. And as soon as they get off the ski lodge, that stops being a main focus anymore.
Yep. So that's it.
Really good movie. Just solid the whole way through.
It's more watchable than Cyclone. I'll give it that. There's some funny stuff in it, right? Unintentionally, so admittedly, but there is some funny reactions and some over-the-top weird relationship drama that did give me a chuckle, and there's a couple of funny deaths / injuries to enjoy. Yes. So I can see why it ended up in this episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000. I can see why it had that appeal to function as that. But yeah, as a movie, if you're just judging it, like, does it work as a regular movie? No, it doesn't. It fails pretty much every hurdle you could possibly throw at it.
Pretty much. I mean, I'm trying to think of, like I said, I think the only thing that was decent, and not great, but decent, was cinematography. I think that the shots were composed well.
Yeah,
and it looked competent there.
That, and it also has some real actors in it, so it does still kind of feel like a real movie, just with all these problems. But
I still think that, again, it might have been a direction thing, and I know the script wasn't strong anyway, but it just feels like nobody wanted to be there. It feels more like, okay, I got cast in this movie, I guess I have to show up.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I'm sure this was just a gig for all of them. This is not something any of them are passionate about. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
This is just a cheap little disaster movie that we're doing before, whatever. Because, this is 10 years after Rosemary's Baby for Mia Farrow. I don't know if Robert Forster had done a bunch of big stuff before this. Like, I know him from some other things that came after this, but yeah, I don't know. And the director's no one to like mention really. I looked up the director, and it said known for Rebel Without a Cause. I'm like, he did that, and there's like, no, he was in that as a small actor in that.
Yeah, he acted. I'd say the big name though that's worth mentioning is the producer was Roger Corman.
Yeah, and this feels like a Roger Corman production. I think that's fair. Hey, say what you want about Roger Corman, he knows how to stretch his money as far as it can go. And to be fair, I do think this movie, like, it feels like it's got more in it than a typical direct-to-video style. And it's not actually direct-to-video, but it kind of was in a way, you know?
Yeah.
It was a formality that it went to a theater first. I think he gets more out of his budgets than other cheap movies typically do. I'll say that. I'll give him that. But it's not saying much. It doesn't really affect how much I enjoy it in the end. So,
yeah,
you know.
No, I mean, I don't really have much more to add to that. I think that everything I said up front is pretty much everything that comes out at the end. I will say, as much as we kind of glossed over it because it's hard to describe exactly what it is, with the actual Avalanche, it's such a haphazard mix of these horrible white painted boulders, these like green screened in effects over top of the footage that just looks horrible, and then stock footage that is so grainy that you can immediately tell it's a different movie. Like, the set piece feels like it was added in as an afterthought rather than the focus of the movie. And so
Avalanche. No.
So ratings wise,
afterthought. No. Okay.
You'll get there. Keep trying.
There's something
after we're done recording.
There's a way of doing it. Anyway, yeah. Ratings, go on. Rate it out of 10.
I mean, I think that this one is I'm going to say 3.5. I think that it is just a shoddily made movie. Like you said, it feels like it was stretched out. Like every little bit of money they had, they saved wherever they could. It does still have good cinematography. It does still have real name actors. So that's going for it. The only thing that I think keeps it from dipping down to like a 3 or even lower than that is it gets to that point of it's just silly at times. It just feels like, oh, I'm not supposed to take this as a movie where I care about what happens to these people and I want to see them survive. I'm supposed to laugh at how crazy some of their misfortunes are. And once you go into it with that, it gives it a little bit more, but not enough to get it above like a 5 for sure. So 3.5 is where I'm at.
Yeah, I don't know. It was kind of easy to watch in places because it was silly. Yeah, I mean, you're probably about right. I'm just deciding if I want to go a nudge lower or a nudge higher. And I honestly don't know. I don't feel strongly enough. Like, I'm not angry enough at it to be like, it's like I need to go really low with it. So
right.
Yeah, I'll be slightly nicer and give it a 4.
All right. Pete likes this movie, everybody. That's what he's saying.
That's a stretch, but sure.
I mean, to be fair, if you want to take a quote out of context, I think I ended the beginning section with like, great movie, tons of laughs.
Yes.
So,
yeah, but it's not a comedy though. So,
true.
So it's in context, it does. It says what you need to know. I think in context,
just pivot it the same way that The Room did. Starts out as a drama right as soon as we first watch it, and then you're like, oh no, it was totally a dark comedy the whole time.
Yeah, as for, does it make the cut or not? Obviously not. I would say it's just a cut from the collection. I don't think I'm angry enough at it to say cut your losses, or certainly not it cuts deep.
Yeah, I think that if it were a bit more incompetent, you could make the argument of cut your losses, but it's still just decently enough there to be normal cut from the collection.
Yeah, it's in that weird place. It's not bad enough to truly recommend it as a bad movie, but it's obviously not good enough to recommend as good either. I
would say I am interested in hearing the MST3K because I feel like they would have some funny things to throw in here, and I have not heard theirs before. So
for sure,
that might be worth checking out.
So there you go. That is Avalanche. We'll be back with one more 70s disaster movie. We're wrapping up the season with Earthquake next week.
Boy.
So look forward to that. And before we go, I will tell you about the bonus stuff you can get if you want to support all the content and help keep it coming. You do get some bonus shows over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. For me and David specifically, we do 2 bonus shows every month. There's some other bonus content as well, but the 2 bonus shows that we do, we have the Criterion Cut, which is where we review movies from the Criterion Collection, so it's kind of the best of the best. We have a monthly show called Extra Reels, where we review some of the worst movies of all time. For example...
No. Don't do the example, Pete. I don't want it.
This month...
No.
Mac and Me is the movie we're reviewing. So you can check out that. Plus, we've done some Neil Breen. We've done some gems. We've done some disastrously painful movies to sit through. So if that sounds like fun, those are at different tiers over at the Patreon. So that is the show. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. We do appreciate it. Keep watching movies. And if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.